Just on that case, 40 years minimum term for the father of Sara Sharif. Should have got a whole life. They should have thrown away the key.
You'd have thought so, wouldn't you?
I thought that when the details came out when he was found guilty, I thought that crossed the bar for a whole life term. I'm shocked, actually. All I can say is I hope the Attorney General reviews it. I hope they go back. The CPS go back and appeal it and make it a whole life term. He shouldn't. There should be no parole.
Well, you kind of wonder when you look at the details of a case such as this, which is really difficult. And if you're a parent, as I know you are as well. It's almost impossible to read this, and you think, my goodness, what would you have to do then to get for it to be worse than this?
You had your callers. Your callers were. I was with Mike the morning after, and your callers were like voice noting and stuff, saying, bring back the death penalty. I'm like, as someone who opposes death penalty, I was sitting there going to Mike, I can't oppose that. No. This was a horrific case. I'm really surprised. It's really disappointed, actually. Just personally disappointed that actually, and I'm just saying that as a dad. They should have thrown the book or just thrown away the key. Just done. No chance of getting out. And I hope. Somewhere somebody goes, takes it up to the Court of Appeal or whatever and says, actually, this is something where we need to review it, and there's actually no chance of parole. But just, for the father especially, it's just horrific case.
It is just awful. And the previous, and the things this man had previously been accused of, and, he was flagged and they knew about him, and it is horrific all around. We will get more detail, and we're asking that question as to whether you sense justice has been served, and I don't think anyone with a straight face would say yes. I don't think there is any kind of justice that makes it. Nothing makes this better in any shape.
But you expect the British judicial system to step up to the plate, and use everything within its power to make sure this individual is never freed and on the streets of this country again. And I'd have thought the only way you can do that and guarantee that is a whole life term. And there are prisoners who are serving whole life terms. So yes, it should be in this case.
Absolutely. Let's look at what is happening with China. I mean, who'd have thought it? Here we are in the 21st century. When we were all kids, it's a bit of a joke that, the kids down the road's trainers were made in China. It was always that gag, made in China. It was sort of a symbol of you bought something a bit cheap. Now, of course, they're dominating. They're selling solar panels to the entire world. They're selling electric cars to the entire world. These aren't people to be laughing at. Whatever we think about them, these are a serious outfit.
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer is in this invidious position because, make no mistake about it, there are those within our security services who are keen that Keir Starmer places China on the enhanced list for its new national registration scheme that's coming in as part of the National Security Act. It's one of the last acts passed by the Conservatives before the general election, which basically means that if you are representing a foreign government, you have to declare it. Now, it's two levels. There's a more benign level for our allies, and then there's an enhanced level for the likes of Russia and Iran, North Korea, and you would expect China. But of course, Keir Starmer wants economic growth. He wants to secure an uptick in our GDP beyond a sort of measly 0.1%. And that's why he's taking a very cautious approach, describing China as a challenge rather than a threat. Businesses like HSBC, they're warning that, if he goes too far and places China on this enhanced list, it's going to be very difficult to do business with their business in China. And that's why he's taking a much more cautious approach. First Prime Minister in 6 years to have met the President, Xi Jinping, back in September. And Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is due to travel there in January. So you can understand his caution, because that's going to be a rather awkward meeting for the Chancellor to say, well, we want to close our economic ties, but no, we're going to put up this bureaucracy. Let's have a listen then to what Keir Starmer said on that relationship with China just yesterday.
We are concerned about the challenge that China poses. Our approach, as you know, I had a meeting with the President just a few weeks ago now. Our approach is one of engagement, of cooperating where we need to cooperate, particularly, for example, on issues like climate change, to challenge where we must and where we should, particularly on issues like human rights, and to compete when it comes to trade.
So there's quite a lot there in what he said, Theo. We've had a few people get in touch this afternoon and say that there's quite a lot of Western propaganda going on here, that, the Chinese are this terrible group of people that are trying to get into our systems and they want to crash the NHS database, bring the internet down so they can almost solidify their dominance over the world. This is nonsense. All they want to do is flog us kit. I mean, is that true? Because other people have countered that and gone, no, hang on a second, this is a totalitarian regime that is not very nice to its own people.
You should see what they've done to the Uyghur Muslims. I mean, it's
indeed.
horrific.
I mean,
education camps and so forth.
It's horrendous. And, you know, these are people we're doing business with.
Yes, and I think it's more, you know, to do with the Chinese, and we've seen the vulnerabilities actually as being criminal gangs with links to the Russians when it comes to crashing our NHS. We saw a huge cyber attack back in the summer with GP appointments backdated. I mean, the chaos that can be caused with these cyber attacks is extraordinary. But if the Chinese, and this is the fear, is given too much power to inveigle their way into every part of British life, that should relations deteriorate between the British and the Chinese, then they would have unprecedented ability to bring our systems to an absolute halt, whether it's our communications, whether it's something as fundamental as the NHS or the railways or whatever. And I think that's why there's a real desire that actually the British government is very cautious about ensuring that any individual who the MI5 and the Home Office fear is spying, and in this case it's Yang Tengbo, who of course has just had his identity revealed, is kicked out of the country and they're not allowed to do it. But this is a man who got to pretty close to the very top of the royal family, the British royal family.
Yeah, he was doing all right on the ladder.
He was, you know, for somebody who's come to this country to study a master's degree at the University of York, to end up hobnobbing with the Grand Old Duke of York, with 2 visits to Buckingham Palace to lead his pitch for the Palace scheme for entrepreneurs in China. He has done well for the Chinese, and it's about, you know, listening to experts over the last couple of days. This is about softening opinion towards China so that we don't see it necessarily as a threat, as something that we should worry about. But of course, do we leave ourselves then exposed to attacks should, as I said, you know, the tensions between Britain and China spill over into something more sinister?
Here's a bit of breaking news. The United Kingdom is to rejoin the EU at 4:30 this afternoon. Freedom of movement will be kicking in at about 5:45, and we'll be back to normal. Up the blues, reds and whites, said Keir Starmer. We're back in. Brussels, do your stuff, said the Prime Minister. Of course, that is a headline many people are terrified of hearing, and there's a lot of mood music around, you know, what our relationship is at the moment. Leavers are warning that Labour's negotiations with the EU are kind of secretly taking us back under EU control.
I think we just need to be upfront. Okay, if it's a negotiation with the EU, if we're reopening those trade deals with the EU and trying to look again at our relationship, then I think the British government just needs to be upfront about what price, because the European Union wants something. They always want something in return. And we've already had, they're already, reigniting this whole thing about, well, we haven't implemented the Windsor framework, what was, of course, the specific agreement to concern Northern Ireland. And that's all just as part of this dance that why should we listen to you? This is Europe to the United Kingdom. Why should we listen to you when it comes to renegotiating the current arrangements when you haven't even implemented the original arrangements? And I think we just need to go into any renegotiation with the European Union with our eyes wide open. And I think politicians owe it to the British public to have their eyes wide, to keep people abreast of exactly what we will have to give away. So the European Union are going to want something when it comes to fishing rights. They're going to want access to our fishing waters, make no mistake around it. They're looking specifically at immigration, but they recognise that there's a recognition that it's not just going to be a return to open borders, but particularly around some sort of youth mobility scheme for the under-30s. That would be reciprocal, but it will mean that many young workers from the European Union countries will be able to come to the UK. And then we go back to the European Court of Justice. There's no way that we are not going to be subject to European Court of Justice rules if we look for a closer arrangement. Now, Keir Starmer, his prize, what he wants is to ensure that there is no bureaucratic wall between British businesses who trade frequently or rely on supplies from the European Union or rely on access to the European Union to ensure that there's no bureaucratic mechanism that gets in the way. For some employers, it's they have to fill in something like 300 pages of forms, and they want to get rid of that. But there will be a price to pay.
Yeah. Here's a little bit of breaking news. We just heard that Nigel Farage and the businessman Nick Candy have held a historic meeting with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago. This was yesterday. The Reform leader and Mr. Candy met up with Mr. Musk. They both said in a joint statement, "We had a great meeting with Elon Musk for an hour yesterday. We learned a great deal about the Trump ground game and we'll have ongoing discussions in other areas. We only have one more chance left to save the West and we can do things better." They say our thanks also to President Trump for allowing us to use Mar-a-Lago for this historic meeting. I mean, you say historic meeting, I don't know if it goes up there with sort of Gandhi sitting there at St James's
It could be very significant, though.
The special relationship is alive and well. It is absolutely is significant, isn't it?
Yeah, because they didn't say anything about money or funding for Reform UK, because there's previously been speculation that Elon Musk, who is of course the world's richest man, worth north of $400 billion, could fund reform at the next election to the tune of £100 million, and of course give it free rein to use Elon Musk to use his social media platform X to put forward their messaging and appeal to the British public. And I mean, if he's meeting with, of course, Nick Candy, who's been brought in, who of course is the other half of Holly Valance, the actress from Neighbours, a big property magnate in London, and
unusual for him to meet somebody richer than him.
Previous Tory donor who gave the Tories north of £250,000 in a 2-year period. He's then been appointed. He's not just joined Reform UK. He's then been appointed the treasurer of Reform UK. So it's interesting that Nigel Farage in that meeting, he was always going to get a meeting with Elon Musk, but he's brought Nick Candy into that meeting as the treasurer of the party. So you would think that this is a look ahead to particularly, to specifically around whether Elon Musk decides to make a sizable donation to the party. He would, Ian, have to do that through a subsidiary of his companies in the UK. There are strict rules which prevent foreign donors from giving money to British political parties to ensure that there's no corruption. But it is perfectly, there's no cap on it, and he is the world's wealthiest man, and he could very easily, if X, and I don't know the details of whether X, there is a subsidiary of X which has a base here in the UK, he could very easily give that money over to Reform, and that would change again, even further, the complexion of the next election.
Absolutely. And just sticking with Nigel Farage for 1 second as well, in terms of the milkshake incident, which he's attacked the sentencing yesterday of the girl that threw a milkshake at him, Victoria Thomas Bowen, 25, threw the milkshake during the election campaign. Of course, she got a 13-week prison sentence, suspended for 12 months. Mr Farage has called it two-tier justice, arguing that one can assault an MP and avoid jail. Of course, it's been pointed out that technically he wasn't an MP, but I think that's largely irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, isn't it? I think sometimes I hold my head in my hands when it comes to the British establishment. The tin ear is, and the tone deafness knows no bounds. This was Nigel Farage required round-the-clock security, still requires round-the-clock security, regardless of whether you agree with his politics. We need to be able to keep our politicians safe in order to ensure that we have democracy. I think, reading the judge's comments, he even acknowledged that. And there needs to be a deterrent. And I would have thought that, Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister, was very robust in making it very clear to the Crown Prosecution Service and to the judicial system during the riots in the summer that when it came to violence that we saw across the country, he wanted the CPS to go for the strict, the toughest sentences, and the judges to hand down those sentences. And I would have thought, if this individual was jailed, then they've ammunition, Nigel Farage's ammunition is gone. But of course they don't, because then he's open to the moniker. Then he's two-tier Keir, and it just feeds the narrative. And many listeners will be thinking, well, isn't it true?
Absolutely, but of course we can apply that to anything. Today somebody probably got jailed for shoplifting in Bridlington, and somebody got a suspended sentence for shoplifting in Skegness.
Yeah, but there's a point here about deterrent. And that was the point that was used in the summer, that actually we need to stop these particular crimes. We need to stop people feeling that they have the right to go and throw a milkshake over Nigel Farage, because next time it could be battery acid. I've been out with Nigel Farage. I've seen him out in Westminster. He now has, I hope I'm allowed to say, he has no fewer. When I was there, he had no fewer than 8 big guys around him trying to ensure his safety. That's mad. The Mayor of London has police protection. He's the Mayor of London. He's in charge of a transport regulator. Yes. I mean, like, for goodness sake, I mean, it's crazy. People out there think that somehow that they have the right to attack our politicians. And regardless of whether you like Sadiq Khan or like Nigel Farage, of course, chalk and cheese, opposite ends of the political spectrum, it's unacceptable.
It is.
And the judges need to be handing down sentences.
And it's not as if we don't...
clear
and we have demonstrable and lethal examples of what, you know, we think of Joe Cox, David Amos, you know, we know what can happen. So, yes, it is surprising in many respects that it wasn't a tougher sentence. Just a final one to finish on. Very briefly, Theo, think of great leaders of our time. Think Thatcher, think Kennedy, think Mandela, and think Humza Yousaf, of course. You know, he sits there in that quad of the greats of our time. He's stepping down. He's announced he will not run for re-election to the Scottish Parliament. 2026, I think, is the next elections. He'll
be 41 years old. What astounded me when I read that story was, you know, I'm stepping down as an MSP. Of course, he completely, you know, shot himself in the foot by bringing that agreement with the coalition of the Scottish Greens to an end. But he said, you know, I'm standing down from as an MSP because I want to hand on, you know, I want to pass the reins over to the next generation of young Scottish MSPs. And I thought, hang on a moment, you're 39 years old.
Yes, in political terms, you are a youngster.
And I thought 39 was, you know, that was sort of the prime of your career. Obviously, he's reached the very top, and then it's come to a juddering halt. But I would have thought that actually, that you know, he would have somewhere to go. You see, he worded his statement as if he's up for retirement.
I know.
But that's I guess that's politics nowadays. They're all in nappies, but I can't quite understand it. The other thing to note is that just the only politician of note who actually said farewell, adieu, Humza Yousaf was John Swinney. Nothing from Nicola Sturgeon, nothing from Kate Forbes. Just a deathly silence.
Yeah, it was. You know, it's time to go. You know, when Peter Bottomley said this, I understood what he meant. He'd been there 500 years. You know, this is a whole different ballgame.